Every week is a challenge in the SEC West, and no one knows that better than the 10th-ranked Ole Miss Rebels. Despite a 6-1 record, the Rebs are riddled with injuries on offense as they now hit the road to face the 18th-ranked Auburn Tigers, surging at the perfect time. What's up, everybody? I'm Sudu Upadea. You know, if this game was being played earlier in the season, I think most people would have Ole Miss winning by a couple of scores. But if you look at what the odds makers are saying right now, they've got Auburn winning by a slight margin. The biggest reason for that is the injuries on the Ole Miss offense. Matt Corral currently only has 1 out of his top 3 targets available. Jonathan Mingo went out with a broken foot before the Alabama game, and Braylon Sanders hurt his shoulder in the Tennessee game and didn't play last week against LSU. And of course, starting tight end Chase Rogers has been out of action as well, although Casey Kelly has stepped up nicely there. That's why we haven't seen the same explosiveness in the passing game as we did earlier in the season. That score from far philosophy Ole Miss had has sort of dwindled in recent weeks. Then you look at the Rebels' offensive line. Starting right guard Ben Brown, the longest tenured offensive lineman for the Rebels, announced this week he's going to miss the rest of the season with a bicep tear. The Rebels' other guard, Caleb Warren, has been limited with injuries as well, so just a lot of moving parts there at offensive line this late in the season. Auburn, on the other hand, is well-rested coming off a bye week and is getting great play out of quarterback Bo Nix right now. This is a guy who was benched just a few weeks ago against Georgia State. It wasn't until backup TJ Finley came in and provided a spark that Auburn would come back to win that game. But something happened to Nix after that. The following week against LSU, Finley went in for a series, and when Nix came back into the game, he looked like the second coming of Johnny Manziel, just dazzling us with incredible elusiveness while throwing for 255 yards and a touchdown through the air, while adding 74 rushing yards and another rushing touchdown on the ground. Now, while he did struggle a bit against Georgia's top-ranked defense, Nix put together one of his best performances as a Tiger just 2 weeks ago against Arkansas. He went 21 of 26 with 292 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, and even added a rushing touchdown to his final stat line. Nix is playing incredible football right now, so it makes sense that most people think the Tigers have the advantage in this game, especially being at home. While Nix is playing really well right now, I'm more worried about the Tigers' 1-2 punch and Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter. Bigsby is an absolute unit, and he's already rushed for 526 yards and 6 touchdowns on the season, and he's averaging around 5 yards per carry. Hunter has a little under 500 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground, but he's averaging a little more than 8.5 yards per carry. This has allowed the Tigers to use what they thought would be their backup running back, Shaun Shivers, as a pass catcher out of the backfield, which has been very effective in some key moments. That being said, it's not like Auburn doesn't have weapons in the passing game. While I'm not necessarily blown away by explosiveness or deep threat ability, guys like Demetrius Robertson, Kobe Hudson, John Samuel Shanker, and Shedrick Jackson have all been favored by Bo Nix this season. The only knock on this receiving core is the amount of drop passes. Auburn's receivers lead the SEC with 23 drop balls, and while they did correct those issues against Arkansas, it's still something to keep an eye on. Now, an interesting stat or matchup to look at going into this game is the amount of sacks Ole Miss's defense has versus the amount Auburn has given up. The Rebels ranked 12th in the country with 23 total sacks on the season, while Auburn has just given up 7 sacks, which ranks top 10 in the nation. Ole Miss is definitely going to look to fluster Bo Nix, so this is going to be a fun little matchup to kind of look at as this game progresses. Now, despite all the injuries on offense, you cannot count Ole Miss out as long as number 2 is quarterback in this team. Matt Corral leads the team in passing yards and touchdowns, along with rushing yards and rushing touchdowns as well. Despite the wear and tear of the season and a bum ankle he's dealing with, Corral just keeps on finding ways to lead the Rebs to victory. Now, it certainly helps when you have 3 really solid running backs in Jerrion Ealy, Henry Parrish, and Snoop Connor, and those 3 guys are once again going to need to play a big role to win this game. Even if Braylon Sanders returns, he's going to be dealing with pain in that left shoulder, so running the ball is absolutely crucial for Ole Miss to win this game. Luckily, Ealy returned to his true form last week against LSU, and Parrish and Connor have been pretty consistent as of late as well. You look at the Auburn defense, they've got some really talented guys at all levels of this defense. Linebackers Jacoby McClain and Chandler Wooten are all over the field getting tackles. Defensive ends Colby Wooden, Derek Hall, TD Moultrie, and Iku Leota are really talented at sacking the quarterback. And in the secondary, Roger McCreary and Smoke Monday have been a nuisance for opposing QBs. Auburn ranks 40th in the nation for total defense, which obviously isn't bad, but where the Tigers' defense struggles is in the red zone. Opposing offenses currently have a 90% score rate in the red zone against Auburn, and that's obviously great news for one of the top scoring offenses in the nation in Ole Miss. All right, prediction time. Listen, if I wasn't an Ole Miss fan, I would easily take Auburn. If I wasn't as plugged into this team, it would be a no-brainer for me. Bo Nix is playing lights out. The game's at Jordan-Hare. Their running backs are really good. Their defense can do enough to win these types of games. But the one thing these national guys that look at stat lines or highlights or however they're coming to these conclusions aren't looking at is what Ole Miss's defense has right now that it didn't have earlier in the season when it was giving up 50-plus points. And yes, I'm saying the Ole Miss defense is the key to win this game. The Rebels once again have their secret weapon available, and that's hybrid safety linebacker Jake Springer. When Springer's in the game, the Ole Miss defense looks completely different from when he's not there. You look at how well the Rebels handled Louisville in the season opener versus all the games Springer didn't play. Huge difference. Then he comes back against Tennessee and LSU, and we start seeing guys getting sacks again, turnovers being forced, talented running backs being bottled up. He makes all the difference on that defense, and based on the improvement I've seen since Springer's return, I think Ole Miss's defense is going to play a lot better against Auburn than a lot of people who, like I previously mentioned, aren't as plugged into this team think. On the offensive side for Ole Miss, how do you go against Matt Corral right now? How can you pick against a guy that no matter the circumstances he faces, finds a way to will his team to victory? Outside of that Alabama game, he has done everything for Ole Miss to succeed and win, and I think that's going to continue to be the case. Until he proves me wrong, I'm not picking against Matt Corral. I think it's going to be a close game. I'm sure with it being at Jordan-Hare, it's going to be dramatic, and there's going to be some kind of wild finish, but I'm going to take the Rebels in this one. It's going to be a close one, but I'm picking Ole Miss. Contributing for the Ole Miss Spirit, I'm Sudu Upadea.